Okay, so in this explainer, we're going to be diving into a pretty intense piece of modern religious rhetoric. It's a prophetic warning that delivers this incredibly stark, uncompromising message of divine judgment. We're going to deconstruct it, pull it apart to really understand its core arguments, its strategies, and the worldview it's trying to build.
Right off the bat, this message does not pull any punches. I mean, the source just wastes absolutely no time. These opening lines set up this intensely confrontational tone. There's zero ambiguity here. This is not a gentle suggestion, it's a powerful, authoritative declaration, and it really sets the stage for everything that's about to follow.
So, to really get a handle on this, we're going to break it down by theme. First, we'll look at the core warning itself. Then we'll get into who exactly it's aimed at. After that, we'll check out the biblical justification they use, the solution they're offering, and finally, the really stark choice it presents to the reader.
All right, let's get into the central claim. The text presents itself not as just some opinion, but as an actual divine warning. It makes it crystal clear that if you reject this message, well, the consequences are about as severe as you can possibly imagine. So how do you give a claim like that some serious weight? Well, the author cites Matthew chapter 10. And this is a really crucial move, rhetorically speaking. It's an appeal to the highest authority. It's designed to give the whole message this divine backing and to frame any disagreement not as just a simple difference of opinion, but as a sin of the highest possible order. This quote here, it really establishes the main call to action. It's a demand for total separation. The message isn't about, reforming a system from the inside. Nope. It's about a complete and total exit from what it calls a corrupt entity, so you can avoid getting tainted by its sins and its punishments. Now, this condemnation isn't just some vague, general warning. The author gets incredibly specific about who is at fault. They move from these really broad categories right down to naming individuals, which creates this powerful us versus them dynamic. As you can see, the accusations are aimed squarely at figures within religious communities. The author is describing what they see as this deep, deep corruption. They're accusing leaders and members of being deceptive, sinful, and just fundamentally fake. And here is where we see that huge shift from general talk to laser-focused specifics. The text makes these direct, personal, and just unbelievably harsh accusations against a named individual. There is absolutely no room for interpretation about who is being condemned here. So you might be asking, what's the justification for accusations this intense? Well, the author builds their entire case around the biblical figure of Jezebel. This provides the theological foundation for all the condemnation we're seeing. By quoting this passage about the church in Thyatira, the author is basically saying, see, this isn't just my opinion. There's a clear biblical precedent for this. It frames the argument not as some personal grudge, but as a divine judgment against a modern-day Jezebel figure. And then this theological argument is brought in as even more proof. It's used to directly challenge the authority of that female church leader mentioned by name a minute ago. It frames her leadership not just as misguided, but as a complete violation of a divine hierarchical order. Okay, so after spending all this time outlining the problem, the corruption, the false prophets, the Jezebel figure, the author finally presents a solution, and it's a path to salvation explained through a really detailed and very specific analogy. The ultimate goal here, the whole point of this, is for true believers to purify themselves and become part of this spotless bride. This is the ideal state, right? A church that is absolutely perfect and ready for the imminent return of Christ. So how in the world do you achieve this state of total purity? Well, the author lays out a two-stage process, and they use the journey of the ancient Israelites out of Egypt as a direct analogy for this spiritual path. Let's just break this analogy down, because it's really the core of their proposed solution. Egypt here stands for the institutional church system, which they see as a place of bondage. Leaving it is step one, but then comes the wilderness, a place of testing, often in smaller house churches, and it's here, away from the system, that one's true inner self is revealed and has to be confronted. Now, to emphasize just how incredibly difficult and exclusive this path is, the author points to this number. Out of about 2 million Israelites who left Egypt, only 2 adults from that original generation actually made it to the Promised Land. The implication is chillingly clear. Only a tiny, tiny fraction of modern believers will successfully complete this journey. So,
All of this builds to the author's final crucial point. After explaining the problem and the path, the text just culminates in this direct, unavoidable challenge to you, the reader. The text presents a clear ultimatum, and there is absolutely no middle ground. You can either remain a victim of what it calls the corrupt church system, or you can embrace what's described as the brutal, painful work of the cross to completely destroy your self-life, your ego, your worldly desires, all of it. And that's the final twist, right there in that question. This process of purification is described as intensely painful, like a crucifixion of your own self. And yet, the text insists that this is a process that has to be embraced not with fear or hesitation, but with active, joyful surrender. And that's our deconstruction. It's a message built on condemnation, on prophecy, and on a seriously demanding path to purity. It really leaves us with a final question to think about. In a world filled with complexity and nuance, what is the appeal of this kind of black and white, uncompromising certainty?